Here we have AP pre-calculus problem. Okay, let's go to the information. The Richter scale is a numerical scale that uses base 10 logarithms for measuring an earthquake's magnitude. The larger the number, the more intense the earthquake. As the intensity is increased multiplicatively by a factor of 10, the Richter scale increases additively by 1. Consider two earthquakes that occurred in the year 2022. An earthquake in Indonesia had a magnitude of 5.1 and an earthquake in Mexico had a magnitude of 2.5. Approximately how many times more intense was the Indonesia earthquake than the Mexico earthquake? So they asked us to compare the earthquake in Indonesia, the intensity of the earthquake in Indonesia and the intensity of the earthquake in Mexico. So we have to compare. Okay, now let me assign the variable x for the intensity of the earthquake in Indonesia. Let me write it. And also I assume y as the intensity of the earthquake in Mexico. Let me write it. Okay, now I have to find x is how many times more than y. So for example, let's say if x is equal to 6 and y equals to 3, then x is how many times more than y. For that we have to divide x by y. Then we get 6 over 3, which is equal to 2. Or we can write x over y is equal to 2. When I multiply both sides of this equation by y, let's see what's happening. So this y will cancel. I'm getting x equals to 2y. So clearly x is x is 2 times more than y. So when I know the values of x and y, I can divide both of them and then I can know x is how many times more than y. But do I know the values of x and y over here? That is, do I know the intensity of the earthquake in Indonesia, the intensity of the earthquake in Mexico in terms of numerical values? No, I do not know. So what do we have to do? So when I go over the information clearly, the first information says the Richter scale uses base 10 logarithms for measuring earthquake's magnitude. So when I know the intensity of the earthquake in Indonesia, that is x, so how do we have to calculate the magnitude of that earthquake in Indonesia? So for that we have to take the logarithm of this intensity x with base 10. That is a log x to the base 10. So this gives the magnitude of the earthquake in Indonesia. And when I take logarithm of this y with base 10, that gives the magnitude of the earthquake in Mexico. So log y to the base 10. So if you know the values of x and y, and if you want to know x is how many times more than y, you have to divide x by y. But I do not know the exact value of x and y, the intensities of the earthquakes in Indonesia and Mexico. But I know the value of this x in terms of logarithm. That is, I know the value of log x to the base 10. So that is the magnitude of the earthquake in Indonesia. The question says the magnitude of the earthquake in Indonesia is 5.1. So its value is 5.1. And also I know the value of log y to the base 10. That's the magnitude of the earthquake in Mexico. That is given in the question, 2.5. So when I know the values of this log x to the base 10 and log y to the base 10, and if I want to know x is how many times more than y, so what I need to do is I have to do the subtraction of these two logarithms. Because when I do subtraction of these two logarithms, in my next step, I can use the properties of logarithm. That is, using the coefficient of rule of logarithm, I can write this one as log x over y to the base 10. So that I'll be able to get the value of x over y. Then I can write x in terms of y. I can find x is how many times more than y. That is, intensity of the earthquake in Indonesia is how many times more than the intensity of the earthquake in Mexico. Okay, so now we know that log x to the base 10. This gives the magnitude of the intensity of the earthquake in Indonesia. So that's 5.1. And log y to the base 10. This gives the magnitude of the earthquake in Mexico. So that is given in the question, 2.5. Okay, so here we have subtraction of two logarithms with the same base 10. So whenever two logarithms are in subtraction with the same base, what we can do is we can write the logarithm once with the base of what we have for the two logarithms over here. And we have to divide the arguments x and y. Then I'm getting x over y. Actually, this is a coefficient rule of logarithm. On the right side, if I subtract 2.5 from y 5.1, I'm getting 2.6. Okay, my aim is to get the value of x over y so that I can express x in terms of y. Okay, for that I have to convert this logarithmic equation to exponential equation. To convert this logarithmic equation to exponential equation, what I need to do is I have to move this log with base 10 to the other side of the equation. So when I move this log with base 10 to the other side of the equation, so on the other side, we have to ignore this logarithm. I have to consider only the base of the logarithm. The value which already exists on the other side will become the exponent of this base 10. Now on the left side, we just have x over y. Okay, now we have to calculate the value of this 10 to the power of 2.6. So when I calculate the value of this 10 to the power of 2.6, I am getting 398.12. So actually it's a long decimal, I just rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, so my aim is to express x in terms of y. So for that, I have to multiply both sides by y. When I do so, this y will cancel. I'm getting x equals to 398.12 y. So clearly x is 398.12 times more than y. So that is the intensity of the earthquake in Indonesia is 398.12 times more than the intensity of the earthquake in Mexico. So like now when I look at the given options over here, so 400 is the value which is very close to 398.12. So the earthquake in Indonesia is approximately 400 times more intense than the earthquake in Mexico. So the correct answer choice for this question is option D.